Are you willing at this moment to take nothing over something? Because worst case scenario, you've got the bipartisan hard infrastructure bill ready to go with the president's assurances, promises that he's still fully committed to work on the human infrastructure bill.
Stephanie, I'm prepared to do exactly what the president wants. And what he said very clearly to the caucus is we want both bills. He offered a compromise framework, $1.75 trillion, less than 2% of GDP, to have universal child care, to have preschool. And most progressives are rallying around that. He said, let's get it done over the next week or so. Let's pass both bills. Progressives agreed.
Good morning and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Cart. It is Saturday, October 30th, 2021. And I say it every week, time keeps flying. We're on the eve of Halloween, and we should have all the little ghouls and goblins out trick-or-treating tomorrow on the 31st. So wherever you are, make sure your kids are safe, according to the CDC. And folks like Dr. Fauci, it should be safe. Continue to practice social distancing and make sure your little ones are protected as you're out trick-or-treating. I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time. We got somebody special in today. We got Irv Joyner back with us. From time to time, he sits in and got a lot to talk to him about. And of course, Val Atkinson. Fellas, welcome back to The Deal.
Thank you.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's jump right into it because I don't want to waste any time. The clip coming into the program today was Representative Khanna, and he's in the Progressive Caucus of the Democratic Party, and Stephanie Rule of MSNBC. She's essentially saying what I've heard a lot, Val and Irv, is that progressives should be happy with anything they get. And I'm a progressive. I'm not happy with anything we can get. I think we should get more. So let me start with you, Val. Talk to me about what you heard Stephanie Rule asking Representative Khanna, and where do the progressives go from here?
Well, what I heard between the lines was that progressives are the ones who are expected by the media to do the caving and do the backstepping and all those other kinds of things. Unfortunately, I don't think progressives have a lot of options here. They're not large enough. I mean, they have a cadre of 100, but they're not large enough to wield any kind of power to have people to give them leeway and that sort of thing. So in order to stay a part of the Democratic Party, in order to stay viable, they're going to have to do things that at least appears on the surface that they are trying to do things to help the Democratic Party and to help Americans. They're going to have to do that. And it may not taste good right now, and it may not look good, but they don't have a choice. If it goes down to 1.5, if it goes down to 1.0, if we start losing some other things within that, if Biden stays where he is and everybody else stays where they are, the progressive are going to have to be smart and go along with that. They can't be seen as the one that's stopping the show, however small this show may be. They can't be the one that's seen stopping it. Now, they may pick up the fight after this is all over. That'll be another fight. And then they could do some things. But this fight right here, they are not in a good place. They have got to be seen as being cooperative. That's the only choice they got.
Well, Irv, I'm gonna throw something else in there. Right now, we're in a battle for just being able to maintain Democratic control in the House and Senate. It's very tenuous as it is, and we're in the middle of things like redistricting that would affect the House. We know that there's some seats in the Senate that are tenuous. folks like Senator Warnock, who has to run again. And then at the same time, there's all these pressures from all the voting law changes that are going on in these states. I know you work on issues around these voting laws. Do the progressives find themselves in a more tenuous position of being able to push for things when the Democrats may not even be in control pretty soon? I mean, can they afford to be pushy?
Well, I think that victory commands respect, and it encourages supporters and participants to join your cause. And to that extent, progressives are going to have to show that they were able to do something, and that with more ammunition, that they can do more. And I think that that is commendable, that they were able to push the issues that we are dealing with today, that everyone have described as being progressive. These are notions that we've been fighting for a long time. But in order to win, at the end of the day, you have to have the votes. You have to have the horses in place. And the progressive elements of the Democratic Party don't have that those horses in place at this point. So it seems to me that it makes sense to get what you can now, and then go back to the pool and try to increase your numbers going into the next session of Congress. But you do that, I think, with the knowledge that Republicans all over this country who are in control of these state legislatures are pushing to cut out a large number of these Democrats, number one, and progressives, number two, such that they won't have a majority going into the next session. So they have to get everything that they can and then attempt to beat back these repressive forces that are designed to draw them out of the political calculus. But I think the first step right now is to win as much as you can. And I think that they have a badge of honor that they can walk around with now, that they have been able to get universal preschool for 3 and 4 years old. They've been able to get care for older Americans. They've been able to expand the child tax credit. They've been able to get clean energy tax credit money, investment and incentive money. They've been able to get a lot of things that were not in the discussion during the past administration. So I would give them an A for what they've been able to do, and then push and promote an effort to get an A+ if you can come back and control the agenda for a brighter day.
Yeah. I want to remind you, you're watching The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Irv Joyner you're hearing right there. He's a professor of law at North Carolina Central Law School. Val Atkinson is in with us. He's the host of Connections on Foxy 107, 104 here in North Carolina, but you can hear it from anywhere in the world. If you get on the internets and get on Al Gore's internet, you can hear us anywhere. So, and then just a programming note, tomorrow on Sunday, you'll be able to hear the three of us again with an expansion of this conversation. So tune in 8 a.m. On Foxy 107, 104 or on the internet. Hey, Val, so the one thing that Republicans are able to do better than the Democrats is to foment crisis, right? To make people panic, to say that all the shelves are empty. Gas is so high that you can't afford it. It bring up all any and everything that's not related to the actual agenda that the progressive Democrats are trying to do. How do you deal with that? Surely gas is a bit higher, but again, we went for 18 months with nobody driving. So there is something called the law of supply and demand. I'm not an economist, but I do know that much. I do know that there's supply chain issues. I work in an industry during my day job where we have orders in for equipment that won't be in probably for 12 to 16 months that we're ordering today that we normally would get in 60 days because of shortages in all around the world with stuff. Is it worth the effort of progressives to try to explain any of this? Or do you just go about your business and talk about your agenda? Because they're certainly going to talk about it on the right.
Well, I think we find ourselves in a position right now, Ed, where progressives on the one hand and the alt-right on the other hand seem to be fighting over this one sliver of the vote, which some people call suburbanites, some people call moderate Republicans, some people even call blue dog Democrats or whatever. But those are the people they are fighting over. Many others are already entrenched in their positions and they know where they are and where they're coming from. The Democrat strategy, as you started off talking about, the strategy that Democrats often employ is always about the business of explaining. And in many debate formats and that sort of thing, and Irv can speak to this better than I can, dealing with the law and in courts and that sort of thing, when you're explaining, sometimes, most of the time, you're losing. And you sound defensive, even if you're not, if you're always explaining those kinds of things. And that's not good for us. And I think we need to get out front and beat these right wingers to the punch sometime, as opposed to waiting for them to set the issue, to set the edge, as it is in football, waiting for them to set the edge, and then we play from that. And we are always explaining, always appearing to playing second best. And I'd like to see us get out and play a little offense and see how well they play defense from time to time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, Irv, I'm gonna put you on the spot. You're in charge of the Democratic Party as of right now, and you're gonna corral all these progressives, and you're gonna get them in a room, and you're gonna tell them what we're gonna do moving forward. What how would you approach trying to? And when we say progressive, let me qualify this. I mean, it can be anywhere from Ro Khanna, who we just saw here, all the way over to AOC and a whole bunch of different people. They all have different ideas too. So you got to get all these people together, the 100 that Val talked about, and you got to tell them how they're going to move forward and work with the rest of the Democrats. What is your suggestion for them? How do you get them to make their case, as it were?
Well, if I'm looking at what is going to come, I'm looking at insurrectionists under the guise of the Republican Party, promoting a bunch of big lies about what has happened over the last 2 years and what did happen during the previous 4 years. So I think it picks up on Val's point of what is the narrative, and that you have to get out with a strong narrative to reshape in the minds of people exactly what the truth is. What is it that has been gained from this administration, and then what was lost over the last 4 years as Donald Trump and his insurgent forces were running the country, because they are going to tell a bunch of lies about the impact of what he was able to do and the destruction of that was engineered on behalf of these, as they would describe it, socialists in the Democratic Party. So you're going to have to get out front with a strong narrative of this is what this agenda has meant for people. And also looking at that, many of the people that the narrative or this agenda has benefited, unfortunately, are people who are not voting. So you also have to encourage and mobilize that constituency to come out to protect the gains that they have made and let them understand, and that might be explaining, and help them to understand that if they don't come out and vote, then they are going to lose those gains that they have been able to obtain over the last 2 years. So if I'm presenting the plan, it would kind of float around those ideas and those notions. But the front end of it, and I'm right on the trail with Val, is that you have to have a strong narrative of successes that you are able to demonstrate, and people can pat that narrative in their pocket.
Yep, in their pocket is where it has to be. You know what? This is a good place for us to take a break. And I think Irv hit on the next thing I want to cover. I want to talk about the insurrectionists. I think that that's not over, and something needs to be done, or else we're going to be in serious trouble. Tim McVeigh drove a truck bomb into the Oklahoma Federal Building, and because he thought that white people were being replaced. That happened when Bill Clinton was president. Do you think they won't do anything more? Shoot, they tried to overthrow the damn government. They stormed the Capitol, people. So look, I hear music. So that means we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the insurrectionists and what happens next. And we'll talk about who was actually involved. You're watching The Deal.
Severe weather can strike anytime, anywhere, but there's a simple way to stay safe. Hey, Jim Cantori here. I stay safe in dangerous weather by planning ahead. You can stay safe too with a few easy steps. Build an inexpensive kit with supplies for your family's needs. Write down important information like phone numbers and medications. Always talk with your family, and remember any pets in your planning. Be ready, be safe. Start your plan today at ready.gov/plan.
Rolling Stone article cites anonymous organizers who claim they coordinated with White House officials and Republican lawmakers multiple times in the weeks leading up to January 6th. I'm now joined by the author, Hunter Walker. Thanks so much, Hunter, for being here. Now, you were at the Capitol on January 6th. You also talked to two of these individuals who were involved in planning the events that happened on January 6th. What was the most important thing you learned about the former President Trump's his efforts to try to overturn the election that he lost, as well as his possible involvement in January 6th after talking to these individuals?
I mean, I think the mere fact that these individuals who I confirmed were involved in planning and organizing the main rally on the Ellipse, as well as multiple of the protests against the election that happened in the weeks leading up to that day, I think the fact that they spoke to the press and the fact that they're communicating with the committee is pretty notable in and of itself.
And welcome back to our second segment of The Deal. It is Saturday, October 30th, 2021. We started out the program talking about the dilemma that the progressives find themselves in and whether or not they can dig out of this hole. If you watch this program, you know that we always try to, we run off at the mouth. I will say what my opinion is. I'm not apologetic about that, but we also try to back stuff up. And as you saw in the clip coming in, your Michelle Sender with PBS NewsHour was talking about a report that was in Rolling Stone about who was involved in the planning of the insurrection on 1/6. Now, Republicans have not wanted to talk about that. And I'm gonna start with you, Irv Joyner, because I know you read that story in the Rolling Stone. Can you give us some background on who actually was involved in the January 6th insurrection and how serious their involvement was?
Well, according to the report, based on information that was provided to the January 6th committee that is investigating the lead up to January 6th and what occurred on that date, a number of Republican elected congressional representatives were actively involved in the organization, mobilization, and direction of people on January 6th. And those efforts were coordinated through Mark Meadows, who was the White House chief of staff and ultimately, as the suggestion goes, through Donald Trump. But they have named specific congressional representatives: Paul Gosar, Lauren Boebert, Mo Brooks, Madison Cawthorn, the plague of North Carolina, Andy Biggs, Louise Gohmert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, along with their staffs and others. But the Rolling Stone article basically identifies those as some of the leading congressional representatives. And when you look at the votes of the members of Congress on January the 6th, you can see a lot more who, in spite of what happened to them, they still voted illegally to overturn the election of Joe Biden as president of the United States. And the Washington Post, the Rolling Stone magazine, and its reporters were able to come up with these tidbits or this investigative results based on information that's provided to the January 6th commission that is now investigating these events. So it's a star-studded cast of people, and it speaks to the notion that over the years, people who are interested in overturning our government have placed themselves in high elected and appointed positions such that they can maneuver the governmental structure and cover up the activities of their collaborators in moving forward with the big lie surrounding the defeat of Donald Trump as president.
Well, Professor Atkinson, I'm gonna ask you to put on your professor hat and let's talk about some history. The only other time that the government was seriously under threat of being overthrown was from also within. It was called the Civil War. I mean, that's really the only time that, I mean, believe it or not, that we've been really, close. The good thing for us is the South had a bunch of people that couldn't fight, and in the North seemed to be better prepared and so on and so forth, and had a better issue to fight on, which was ending slavery. These people who were named by Professor Joyner, these are legislators. These are people in the Congress of the United States. Have we ever historically had Congress people other than the Civil War who've been, involved in any kind of, cabal, organized effort, whatever you want to call it, coup attempt, to any degree in American history that you know of?
Not to my knowledge. That doesn't mean that it hadn't been, but not to my knowledge that it's been this way. And this is the thing that most of us can't really fathom. I mean, how could it be in the 21st century that everybody's not just up in arms, almost, quitting work, boycotting, whatever? We can't imagine how we are taking this thing so calmly. People trying to overthrow the government, and we're still going about our daily lives, planning vacations, and doing those kinds of things. I give you a point of personal history here. When I first was assigned, my first duty assignment in the military was in what we call then Western Europe, Nuremberg, Germany. This was only 18 years, mind you, after the end of World War II. So a lot of the people that I made friends with in Germany actually fought in World War II, were affected by what was going on. And I was taken aback. I was amazed how these good people could allow a guy like Adolf Hitler and his cronies to do what they did. I just couldn't believe it. And it just has been recently that I understood how it could happen. I mean, he was giving them annual free leave. Everybody had free vacations. And the people in Germany, the citizens, knew nothing about Auschwitz. They had no idea. They were shocked themselves when it was discovered what they were doing over there. So you had a tyrant that gave the people what they wanted, kept them happy, and he, on the other hand, was doing everything he could to become world dictator and ruler. And he was caught in an insurrection. He went to jail and spent some time, and he came back out and he made it work. He became ruler of Germany and started World War II. Now, I hope we don't go down that same path, but I'm putting the onus on the American citizens, not our elected officials, because we're the ones that's got to act. And we've got to do something and say something to show that we ain't going to sit by and take it and just allow a guy like Donald Trump and all of his cronies to take over this great thing called the United States of America, turn it into some type of autocracy, and run democracy in the ground and let it be gone bye-bye forevermore. We've got to do something. And like my daddy used to say, if you got something and you claim you love it and you can't do without it, but you're afraid to fight for it, you're lying to yourself.
Yeah. Irv Joyner, Val brings up a good point. Adolf Hitler was able to give people things and he was able to placate people or whatever. Donald Trump killed 700,000 people. I'm not going out on a limb. The pandemic, Dr. Burks spoke about it this week. She said that Trump spent an inordinate amount of time concerned about his reelection and not about finding the strategy to get rid of COVID. He denied COVID for the longest time, even though he's on tape saying he was fully aware. He got COVID, nearly died. And he continued just a path of destruction. And the only thing he did that he can mark down as a success was get people on the court who would try to end abortion rights and would try to end voting rights and all that. I'm still mystified, Irv, as to how there are people who think that's a good idea. So when you hear people talk about the people who are on the Supreme Court, because you know about the court, so I'm gonna ask you about this, and all the things that they want this court to do, and they want more of it from this court. What do you think what are you really hearing from people? Do people really want Roe versus Wade overturned? Do they really want to get rid of voting rights? And if they do want that stuff, what is the real outcome they're trying to achieve?
Well, I think, Ed, a big struggle that we have in this country in terms of the law is whether we expand the protections of the Constitution. This Constitution was enacted by white politicians to create a nation for white people and in the interest of white people. And the legal history confirms that. All we have to do is look at the earlier Justice Taney decisions in Dred Scott that speaks forcefully to that notion. Since the Civil War and what I call the redrafting and reordering of the Constitution with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, the effort has been to expand the reach of the Constitution such that it protects the largest group of people, the diverse communities that we have, so that they are able to enjoy the fruits of their labor in the greatest country in the world. And on the other side of that are people who don't want those diverse elements or diverse populations to succeed in the same manner that they have been able to succeed in this country, and want to take it back to this notion of by whites, for whites, in the interest of whites. And that's what we're fighting against. We're fighting that the Constitution has real meaning and protection for the least of these. And we are a part of the least of these. And that's what this struggle is all about. And they are seeking to put people on the court who would interpret the Constitution in its most narrowest manner, such that these protections are not provided to this expanding and diverse community. And the notion that by 2050, that the majority in this country is expected to be people of color, a panic has set in. And there is this ongoing fight now to save this country for whites, the way that it was originally designed to be. And I think that, quite frankly, that's what the struggle is all about. Yeah. The right wing is saying that. Take our country back. Back to where? Back to Dred Scott.
Well, I ain't going. So they can try to drag all they want to. I am not participating in that particular program. You know what? It's a good place for us to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to finish up on that topic because it leads me into something else, Irv. I want to talk about critical race theory. And people throw the term around all the time, have not one clue as to what it's actually talking about. And so we're going to talk about that and a whole bunch more. Stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
This one's for the real ballers and shot callers, the sisterhood of women in tech. They're discovering cures, building apps, and programming the blockchain. They're CEOs, worldwide hustlers who can make it rain. They're tearing down the old boys club and seeing big gains. Because when women in tech come together, you know they make that change.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
Why do you ask that, kiddo?
However, have you noticed recently that there are a bunch of people who act like animals? You know, they just look at the superficial characteristics. They say things like the most important determinant of your life is your race, something you can't control, as opposed to your character, which is something you can control. That's why Dr. King dreamed of the day when people would be judged on the basis of their character and not the color of their skin. See, folks, we're going backwards.
Welcome back to our final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That is Irv Joyner, and that is also Val Atkinson, who's here with us every week. And we've been having a lively discussion today, and I'm glad Professor Joyner is here. Unfortunately, on the way in, you had to hear Ben Carson. Now, Ben Carson made it through medical school, became a noted neurosurgeon, blah, 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 right? But that clip you just saw was him at a white Baptist church trying to explain Irv critical race theory. And in his speech, he invokes the one Dr. Martin Luther King, which folks on the right are fond of doing. And they only quote one thing, which is content of your character, right? So he starts to go down this road that there's some people who act like animals, which I don't know what the hell that was about. And then he invokes King and says that people should be judged by the content of their character, as if white folks don't ever do anything that would make me suspicious. Because when I'm driving in my car and the cops pull up on me, Irv, I'm not really looking forward to that encounter, whether I've done anything or not. So can you first explain to me what the hell Ben Carson might have been talking about Dr. King, but more importantly, why is Ben Carson trying to explain critical race theory to anybody, especially a church full of white folk?
Well, wrong communicator, obviously wrong audience. He is, and I hate to use this term, but an apologist for the right wing of our country. He was celebrated as a heart surgeon, as someone who needs head surgery. He is in need of correcting himself with the skills that he's been able to utilize. But critical race theory is a process of analyzing history and developing an understanding of how history has impacted the development of race and racial relations in this country. It doesn't change anything. It's just a method of analysis. What we are interested in here is critical race history, which all of these people need to understand, because the history is as clear as night and day. It doesn't need any interpretation. It speaks for itself. So this notion of the character of the person has nothing to do with something that African Americans need to do, but rather goes to the notion of, are you going to respect and defend and protect this democracy that we have in this country and the promises of that democracy? And for racial minorities, that's the heart of what our involvement in this country has to be. Because without those constitutional protections, then we are back before the Civil War, where we are at the mercy of people who are in the majority. And if no one else has a reason to fight, African Americans have a reason to fight, because our very lives are dependent on us winning that fight.
Mm-hmm. Well, Val Atkinson, once upon a time, we Negroes were not people, according to even the Supreme Court of the United States. All you need to do is go back to Dred Scott, Plessy versus Ferguson, and obviously the attitudes of white people from the founding of the country, where they could not write us into the Constitution. So again, I'll ask you to put on your history hat here. Talk to me about all those periods of time in America when somebody tries to do something for colored folk. What's the response of people? And I won't even call it on the right, because I don't, this is not even a right left issue. This is a human issue, right? Black folks are full human beings, just like everybody else. But there's been this theme with America in particular, but even Western Europe, where brown and black people are not humans. And so how do white people respond in America over the course of time in history whenever you try to do something for black folks?
That's a great question, Ed. And when you say white folks, it's the response of people that are doing things in their name. And then they sort of find themselves in the rear catching up. And I call it tit for tat in my first book that I wrote, Southern Racial Politics. It was tit for tat. And I start off way back at the Brown decision. Right after Brown decision, there was the Southern Manifesto, which some of the things that they did, they closed up swimming pools. Right in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, they filled swimming pools full of cement just so they wouldn't have to integrate and those kind of things. The 64 and 65 acts, Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act, they produced the Southern strategy. That was the tit for tat on that. Dent, Mr. Harry Dent Sr. is the father of the Southern strategy that was used by Richard Nixon to take advantage of people who were coming to the polls as a result of the of the Voting Rights Act. And it goes on and on. When we look at busing, that was championed by one of our champions here in North Carolina, Mr. Julius Chambers, when he argued in the courts on that, Charlotte Mecklenburg. We saw some things that were unbelievable when people start talking about reverse discrimination, and you saw all kinds of things going before the courts at that particular time. we've always had tit for tat. And even after Jimmy Carter was elected president, they gave us Ronald Reagan. And things have been going sort of in a funny direction ever since that. So we have a long history of whites really fighting against any advancement of non-whites in this particular country, because too many of them have seen or take the position that this experiment, as it was called, was about and for white people. They look upon non-whites as less than. They do not want to be ruled by someone who they think are less than them, are ignorant, are not capable, live in shitholes, for communities, and those kinds of things. That's what they're fighting against.
Yeah.
They won't buy a house in your community and be the only white there, okay?
Yeah.
And they don't want to live in a country where they are in the minority, run by you guys, which are incapable of organization.
Yeah.
That gives them the impetus to do the kind of things that they do. This is why they do it.
Well, Irv, I don't know if you saw the case. There's a ruling that came out, I think it's either Thursday or Friday of this week, where a white man sued. He got a $10 million judgment, saying that he was dismissed from his job because they were trying to achieve diversity in the workplace. Are you familiar with the case, number one? And then if you can speak to this notion that folks are trying to steal. I mean, we can go back to the Bakke case, I guess, and this whole notion that there may be some reverse discrimination, that white men are under some pressure or being oppressed or whatever. Do you have any sense of that?
The anti-affirmative action group or cadre that basically takes the position that under no circumstances are African Americans, no matter how intellectual they are, capable of winning a position over a white person. That in every situation, a white person is superior, no matter how inferior they might be. And this notion of promoting African Americans to positions of power is something that, and Val makes the point that whites have to fight against, because it is what they call replacing them. And in Charlottesville, that's what they talked about. You will not replace us. But here was a situation where you had a person who was superiorly qualified for the position and got the position. And so they were able to come before a jury of mainly whites who declared that was illegal. Never before in the history of the law has somebody been able to get $10 million for losing a job. It just doesn't happen. There isn't a legal theory that would support an award of back pay, which is what it would be, of $10 million for a person who's lost a job. So, but this is a part of the struggle that we have been engaged in since the 60s, when we began to push to diversify these positions of power. And this pushback is that no African American is ever qualified enough to lead any institution. And that became very prominent in the thinking of people when Barack Obama had the nerve to run for and win the position of president of this country two times. And that intensified this pushback, and is in the minds of those people who awarded this $10 million to this white person.
Yeah, Val, you talked about that backlash. I was thinking about Barack Obama when you were talking, and Irv, you brought it on home. We're still in a very tenuous position. Obviously, the way the American government is set up is that you can win the House because you can gerrymander your way to having districts that will allow a minority to be in control. We already see that. We know that the Senate, small states like West Virginia and Kentucky have inordinate amount of control. Montana have inordinate amount of control over the Senate because they get the same number of votes as a state like California, where you got nearly 40 million people. And if you add New York, California, and North Carolina, you got damn near half the people in the country, but we have no power at all. When you stack all those things on top of each other, Val, and then you have these people who are essentially running scared, right? Who are willing to do damn near anything to try to maintain and hold on to power. People like Mitch McConnell and people like Joe Manchin, frankly, who is supposed to be a Democrat. What do we do? So here is the question for the week. What will next week look like? We started off the program, as we get to the end here, we started off the program talking about what do the progressives do? I'm going to ask you, Val, what does a moderate Democrat like Joe Manchin do, Kirsten Sinema do, to get something done so that we don't fall completely into the abyss, having to deal with these right-wing folks who are scared to death and are willing to do anything? Are we going to get anything out of Joe Manchin to keep us from falling completely over the cliff?
I think that we will get Joe Manchin to come on board finally after he's had his fill of bigger than thou. He'll be fine. I think this will give him some type of impetus to move forward and give himself the title of assistant leader in the Senate or whatever. He'll make up something. But he's gained a lot from this. But I think in the end, we'll find that he'll come up and they'll make it so that Kamala will cast her first vote to break the tie. I think both Sinema and Manchin will come around. I don't know what that package will look like, but I think they'll come around and they'll do that. Let me make one other point on this, Ed, and I hope we got time. While we are doing all of this and making all of these changes and doing things, I'd love for Biden to appoint a committee or commission or whatever. Somebody has got to take a look at the 12th Amendment. And we've got to do something there because we've got a problem. The strategy that Trump had, if things would have gone his way, was to declare the election invalid, declare a degree of martial law, throw the election into the House. It's called a contingent election. And in the House, in a contingent election, every state gets one vote. So it doesn't matter. And there's no way at the way it's constructed right now that Democrats could ever win a contingent election because you need 26 votes to win. 26. And if you look at the red states now, they far outnumber the blue states, and they have way more than 26 of them to do what they need to do to to choose the president of the United States. We've got to look at that because next time we may not be so lucky to have a guy like Mike Pence to get in contact with a guy like Dan Quayle and decide that he was not going to follow a guy like Donald Trump. We may not be that lucky next time.
Well, that's scary. In the minute or two we got left here, I do want to ask the law professor here about that. We mentioned a whole bunch of archaic notions that are in the Constitution, like these contingent elections, like the Electoral College, like every state has only 2 senators and they have equal weight, despite the fact that some states have 10 times the population of other states. Like the districts are drawn by people back in the states, and that there's no national election. I mean, in all honesty, we don't have a national election system, right? It's all these little counties, and in some places, cities have their election boards. On a real tip, is there anything that anybody has ever talked about to try to corral some of this? I mean, that I just gave you a whole laundry list of stuff. I mean, where do you start, Irv, if you had an opportunity? What would be the place? Where would you go to try to make a change in the Constitution? Again, I'm giving you a lot of power today. Now you can rewrite the Constitution. Well, out of those things, what would you change first?
Well, obviously, the 12th Amendment is something that you have to look at because that was enacted for a different day than what we have now that we are dealing with. But also the notion of reforming the Constitution so that there is a federal right to vote. We don't have a federal right to vote, nor do we have authorization for the federal government to give protections to people who wish to vote. We have a statute that is in place, but that is easily dispensed of. So what we need to fight for, I think, is a federal constitutional right to vote. And then what we have to also work on is helping people to understand the value of the vote, and without exercising that vote where we put people in place, because if we don't put them in place, somebody else will put them in place. We need to put people in place who have an allegiance to the Constitution and our understanding of the Constitution, because right now, if the question is raised in the Supreme Court, it will be a negative one because it is overburdened with conservatives on that, and we need to reform and change that structure in order for us to have a shot at expanding the protections of the Constitution.
Well, guess what? That means I'm probably going to be moving to an island somewhere in the Caribbean because I'm not sure I trust these mofos up in the Supreme Court at this moment. I'm a weird person. I actually listen to the oral arguments of the court. And in this group that's on the court now, I just really have a whole bunch of problems with them. But that's for another conversation, right? We're about to run out of time. So I always ask at the end of the show, our guest, Irv, what's coming up this week or anything we got to look forward to? We should keep our eyes on, or anything you think we need to know?
Well, we have in North Carolina just challenged the ability of the North Carolina General Assembly to redistrict the state Senate and the state House of Representatives in the fact that they have not utilized the method for redistricting that has been established by the North Carolina Supreme Court. And we are calling on the court now to halt that process, to enjoin the legislature from moving forward with the redistricting process until such time as the criteria that they use is consistent with established law here in the state of North Carolina.
Well, that I'm glad you're working on that. And Val Atkinson, what do we got to look forward to this week? What are you working on? Or
I want to ring a bell for all the municipal elections that are coming up here. They are very important around the southern part of Wake County. In particular, there's a lot of African Americans and minorities that are running for elective office, for mayor, for town council, and that's where the rubber meets the road. And I employ people to get out there, know who these candidates are. More importantly, folks, get your tail to the poll and vote. You got to make it happen.
You got to make it happen. I owe everybody an apology. You had to hear Ben Carson today. I'm sorry about that, but I wanted to make a point. So, Brother Ben, please get some help if you can. Hey, folks, look, I'm glad you took the time to spend some time with us this week. As always, I want to thank Val Atkinson for being in, and really appreciate Professor Joyner for coming in and giving us some good sound legal opinion. So in the meantime, go out and do something good for somebody today, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Work hard, work hard, work hard.
this moment to take nothing over something, because worst case scenario, you've got the bipartisan hard infrastructure bill ready to go with the president's assurances, promises that he's still